Vladimir Putin is now a wanted man. Russia's president has been indicted as a suspected war criminal for the forced removal of children from Ukrainian territory. Since Russia launched its war on Ukraine, Kyiv says thousands of children have been taken.
It's
not only Putin who should be put on trial. It's all the main people for what they did to the children.
We've met women forced to travel deep into enemy territory to get their children back.
I should never have let him go. But we didn't know. They just took him and that was that.
Russia claims it was protecting them from danger. But we've investigated the ideology that's driving its actions and found new evidence of how the Ukrainian children Russia takes are treated.
I look at them here in this Russian-run school. They've got military uniforms and they've got these Zs on their sleeves.
The symbol of Russia's war on their country. It is the most anxious journey of these mothers' lives. They're rushing to reach the children they've been separated from for 6 months. I join them on the first stage of their trip. Ukrainian women heading for Russia to find the children sent to summer camps there and never returned. Alla tells me every minute now counts, because the children have been told they'll be put in care if their mums don't come for them.
The children started calling us in panic, and Russia is huge. So where would we have looked for them?
So this is the start of a grueling trip across thousands of miles that'll take the women deep into the country that's declared war on them. Alla shows me the video her son Danila sent from his summer camp in Crimea. He's 13 and he went there in October when his own city was occupied. But when Kherson was liberated, the Russians refused to send the children back. So Alla has felt like a part of herself is missing for 6 months.
I should never have let him go. But we didn't know. They just took him and that was that. My son had seen explosions. I wanted him to relax from the war. And then this happened. I just hope we make it in time.
Alla had been struggling alone to know how to reach her son safely. But in Kyiv, she was met by the group that's helped organise this whole trip. But Alla and dozens like her.
So the group's just arrived in Kyiv, but this is just the very first stage of an extremely long and arduous journey to try and get their children back.
Kherson is now cut off from Crimea by the fighting, so the women have to make an enormous detour. First to Kyiv from Kherson, then from here they'll head for Poland, before crossing into Belarus, which is Russia's big ally in this war. It's then a flight to Moscow and a 24-hour drive south to the children's camp. Thousands of miles to end up a short distance from home. These days, Kherson is under Russian attack. Its forces have been taking their revenge on the city. since they were forced to retreat last year, ending months of occupation. Daily life now brings terrible danger here. And yet Moscow had proclaimed this part of the Russian world. That's when Ukrainian children were subjected to this. The anthem of an occupying force. The video from a summer camp was posted by proud pro-Russian officials. But look more closely at the faces and what happens when the camera spots the girl with her ears covered. Alla is no supporter of Russia, but when she sent Danila to that same summer camp, she'd begun to doubt Kherson would ever be freed. She never thought her child would be stuck on the other side of a front line.
We started getting calls saying they wouldn't bring the children back. They said, if you want them, come and get them. I ran to the school headmaster for help. I wrote to the local administration, but they did nothing. They said they would only bring the children back when Kherson was Russia again.
That's when Save Ukraine stepped in. They've done all the paperwork and the permissions that Russia demands. Now they're preparing the women for how their children may have been affected by 6 months living under Russian rules.
It was like soft power, when step by step we Russify all of these children. It's about months. It's not about one day to strengthen them and to convert them to be Russian. No, it's like every day you will sing our songs, we will feed you, we will tell you bad things about Ukraine. Yeah, and if your parents will not take you back, you will stay in Russia, you will be Russian children.
For Alla, there's time for a last call home to a family waiting and worrying.
I worry every single day that something could go wrong. It gnaws away at me. And it will do, until I have my son back next to me. I worry I won't make it in time, and I will be worried until we're home and I can breathe again. But I can't yet.
This is as far as we can go with Alla. Once they leave Kiev, the women will turn off their phones for security. At the border, they'll invent cover stories about their trip, scared of being turned back. The stress will be enormous. A few days after we filmed Olga setting off to get her granddaughters, her heart gave out. She died in Russia by the side of a road. This is a war that's created all sorts of victims, brought all sorts of pain. But it's the fate of Ukraine's missing children that's driven the International Criminal Court to issue its first arrest warrants. And that's why he is now a wanted man. Vladimir Putin must have thought his war would be swift and glorious. Instead, it's got him indicted for the illegal deportation of Ukrainian children. And it's been carried out in plain sight. I checked the channel of Russia's children's ombudswoman. Maria Lvova-Belova is now a suspected war criminal too. She's posted all sorts of videos like this, where she's removing children from occupied parts of Ukraine delivering them to Russian families. Vladimir Putin changed the law to make it easier to adopt them.
She's even adopted a boy from Mariupol herself. This is Philippe, and he's become a Russian citizen.
We did ask the Ombudswoman for an interview twice, but she didn't reply. Online, though, she paints all of this as if Russia is saving children from danger.
The thing is, I've carried on scrolling through this account and I've looked at all of the posts, and it becomes clear very quickly that this is not a humanitarian mission, it's an ideological one. Because, for example, if you look at this video that the Ombudswoman has posted, just here. She's talking about how Russia is protecting the people of eastern and southern Ukraine from the Nazis there. And she says that these are our people. They're all part of one big family. And that's why Russia, she says, can't leave those children. Basically, she's saying they're Russian children.
Ukraine says more than 19,000 children have been taken to Russia, though its lists aren't public. We don't know how many have been adopted. We do know that many were taken from Ukrainian special schools and children's homes. Last September, Sasha was taken from his school in northeastern Ukraine, removed without a word to his family. Forced separation would be upsetting for any child, but Sasha has special needs, and for someone so vulnerable, it was deeply unsettling. His mum had to travel thousands of miles to get him back, deep into occupied territory. And Tatiana has new proof of how Ukrainian children are treated there.
Tatiana just showed me this photograph, and these kids here are classmates of Sasha, of her son. And look at them here in this Russian-run school. They've got military uniforms and they've got these Zs on their sleeves. These are the symbols of Russia's war on their country.
Sasha has identified 3 children in these pictures. The writing on the classroom wall shows the Ukrainians were dressed to celebrate a Russian military holiday. Sasha clearly remembers the day they were taken, when Russian soldiers in balaclavas came to their school with guns. They loaded him and 12 other children onto buses and drove off with them.
To be honest, it was pretty scary. I didn't know where they were taking us.
Sasha then had no contact with his mum for 6 weeks. When I asked how hard that was,
Yes, to be honest, it's too distressing to even remember.
the teenager is now safe with his mum in Germany. They're living as refugees because their city is being pounded by Russia's military. Tatiana remembers how frantic she was when Sasha disappeared, and the moment she was finally told he was at a special school in occupied eastern Ukraine and she could call him.
He cried into the phone. It was the first time we'd spoken in 6 weeks. He was happy to hear me, of course, but he really cried. He wanted to come home. The children had been told their homes had gone, that everything had been destroyed. And Sasha was afraid we were gone too.
Sasha's town is now under attack by Russian forces. Ukraine retook Kupiansk in September, ending almost 7 months of occupation. But the Russians didn't retreat far. And Sasha's school is now in ruins too. The Russian missiles landed a few weeks after he left here. The pictures were filmed by a teacher.
Это со второго этажа съемка.
Mykola showed them to me in Kiev, where he and his family have now moved for safety. He told me how he'd seen the Russian soldiers take Sasha and the other children from the school, but he'd been powerless to stop them.
Приехали ребята все одинаковых камуфляжах.
They were all in identical camouflage and body armor with good weapons. They had balaclavas on, so you could only see their eyes.
10 минут они собрали всех, причем...
It only took them 10 minutes to gather everyone together. They weren't talking. All they said was, quick, quick, quick. I just had a chance to ask where they were taking the kids and to say, let me go with them. But they said, no, go home, because if you leave, you won't be coming back.
I put to him what Russia says, that in cases like this, it's just taking children to safety.
I lived under occupation, so I know the difference between what the Russians say and what I see for myself outside of my own window. The two are totally different.
There was no reason to evacuate back then. It wasn't like now, when everyone's leaving. This was abduction. They just took the children.
Sasha has always been withdrawn, but Tatiana says he's even quieter these days. He's told his family the children were banned from even mentioning Ukraine or speaking their own language. So I asked Tatiana what she thinks about the arrest warrant issued for Russia's president.
It's not only Putin who should be put on trial. It's all the main people, the commanders, all of them, for what they did to the children. What right did they have? They knew it was impossible for us to get them back, and they didn't care.
I called the woman in charge of the school where Sasha was taken, using a Russian number, so there was a chance she'd pick up.
Алло, добрый день. Татьяна Викторовна?
We know that 5 of Sasha's classmates are still stuck there. But I wanted to know about that Z mark, the Ukrainian children dressed as Russian soldiers. So what if they were? The school director shot back. What kind of question is that? Soon after, the line cut out. Eight days after Alla and the other mothers left Kiev, we headed north to wait for their return, past reminders of how war has changed even the most remote corners of this country. I'd already seen the big reunion in Crimea at the summer camp. Russian TV cameras were brought in to capture the moment. For Alla and her son, the tears, the emotion are real. But the rest is twisted. The reporter claims Ukraine did nothing to help these mums, which isn't true, and that Russia protected their children. But it was Russia's invasion of Ukraine that separated them, and Russian officials who did nothing to get them home. Now the children were about to cross the border, the final stretch of their long journey home, and they had to make this part on foot.
So after about 3 hours being questioned at the Ukrainian border, the first groups are just coming through. I can see some of the women and their children waving as they cross the border finally.
Добрий день! Добрий день!
6 months apart, and then days of travel to get back here. Danila had been scared he wouldn't see his mum again, but Alla made it. And the stories of their traumatic trip begin to spill out between the welcome hugs.
They held us for 14 hours at Moscow airport. They kept us like cattle, separate from everyone else. 14 hours being questioned, with no water, nothing.
The women were asked about Ukraine's military movements, but they had nothing to tell.
Well, Alla is finally back, but clearly exhausted. And yet I just heard her say that she was so happy the moment she took her first step back on Ukrainian soil again.
The children say they were treated okay in Crimea, but as Russians. They'd get lines if they refused to sing the anthem. And they confirm what they were told would happen had their mums not come for them. They said would be adopted, this girl says. So Alla's relief at her reunion is immense.
That moment when we met makes up for everything we had to go through. As soon as I saw my child running towards me in tears, everything, all the struggle, it was all worth it.
I asked Danila what he felt.
I don't know. It was just brilliant.
He had worried it might never happen.
They told us they'd only take us home from camp when the war ended, when Kherson was Russian.
These children told me others were still stuck at the summer camps because Russia makes it so hard to return them. 31 made it back on this trip, including Ksenia, who'd been separated from her mum for 7 months.
We ran up to her. We were so happy. My sister even burst into tears from happiness. Now I just want to see everyone, the dogs, to hug everyone, and that's it.
But those returning are just a tiny handful of the total Ukraine's government has recorded as missing. Even after Vladimir Putin was indicted for their removal to Russia as a suspected war criminal.